Hi, I'm Brent Johnson, and I'm glad to be back here with you. We are gearing up to head back out on the road very soon, and you should start seeing some new videos next month. But until then, I've got something else here to show you. In October of last year, the American Institute of Organ Builders was able to have their normally annual convention for the first time in 2 years. It was planned for 2020, but they did it in 2022. And this was held in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I bet a lot of you know what's there. If you don't, the largest pipe organ in the world is housed in Boardwalk Hall in Atlantic City. It's a mid-Merloche organ that is not fully playable, and some people will argue and say, well, the Wanamaker's bigger because it has more pipes. That is a fair argument, but the scale of the Atlantic City organ is so immense compared to even the Wanamaker that while it doesn't have quite as many pipes, it is a much bigger instrument, a much bigger sounding instrument. At the AIO conventions, organ builders get to see instruments like this. They went and visited some others while they were there, but there were also some lectures with pertinent information for organ builders. If you're interested in that sort of thing, you should look up the American Institute of Organ Builders and see what it takes to become a member and attend their conferences. This one in particular, though, I thought would be interesting to many of our viewers. It's about the mutations in the organ of Boardwalk Hall, specifically about mutations in harmonics in general and how they work. These, of course, are the stops with fractions next to them, the 2 2/3 and 1 3/5, and all of the many permutations that come out in the very big organ there in Atlantic City. Carl Hersom is the shop foreman there at Boardwalk Hall, and he gave a discussion about these stops and how they work in music and sound, and also how you tune some of these very odd stops here in the organ. He's assisted by his husband, Nick Myers, whom you may remember from previous videos. Nick is at the console while Carl is talking. Now, if you're familiar with mutations and harmonics and how they work in acoustics, the first half of this video might be a little slow for you because Carl is covering the bases to make sure everybody has all the information. If you're not sure how they work and what we're talking about, then you will be well prepared for the entire video by watching Carl's explanation. So my thanks to Mark Hotzenpiller and Brad Jones at the American Institute of Organ Builders for allowing me to share this video with you. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi everyone, I'm Carl Hersom, if you haven't figured that out by now. I'm the shop foreman here, and way back when we were planning this thing in 2018 and 19, forever ago, trying to figure out topics for lectures, I kind of involuntarily talked myself into this one with the rest of the planning committee. So yeah, I just had this idea of talking about mutations in organs and where else there are very few pipe organs around the world that have as many and as an expansive array as this organ does. And so eventually that just turned into, well, why don't you do that? And that's how I'm up here today. So last thing before I start, some of this might seem a little bit elementary to some of you. I hope by the end of it, all of you can get something out of it. But I've definitely been in conversations with colleagues of mine where they're yapping away about some topic, and I'm just sitting here like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I feel like I should. And I hope that I can maybe fill in some blanks for some people that might feel a little too self-conscious to ask the question of why these things are here or where they come from. So with that, I hope all of you can get something out of my presentation today. So I will begin, and that starts with Nick. The registration you just heard used only flue voices. There was no 32 used, nor was there a 16-foot used. The lowest pitched rank was a single 8-foot voice, the doppelgedeckt. This registration is a result of an incredible array of mutations available in the swell choir division, and ultimately because of the harmonic series. We will explore what is able to make this illusion of a 32-foot reed, why it works, and where these fractional stops come from. I think all of us here know at least something about the harmonic series. We as organ builders and technicians throw around the terms upper harmonics, overtones, partials, and the like when referring to the timbre of various voices in an organ. Why are these terms used so often? What do we really mean when using them? Why do we need them? European scientist and overtone singer Wolfgang Sauss gave a wonderful summarization of the harmonic series, saying, "The harmonic series is not only for the basis of music, it allows us to speak and sing, to recognize people by their voice, to locate sounds, and to distinguish a piano from a flute," end quote. This is where pitch and timbre collide. Before knowing there was such thing as the harmonic series, I look back and see my own personal interest in this topic began in middle school band. Wondering why a French horn sounds different from a trumpet, why a trombone sounds different from a euphonium, or why a clarinet sounds different from a saxophone. I distinctly remember in 7th grade band when one of the pieces we played called for a soprano saxophone. Aside from unknowingly hearing Kenny G playing the soprano sax over the mall's Muzak, or from my parents watching an episode of Law & Order SVU, this was the first time I had seen and knowingly heard this odd gold clarinet. For those that didn't grow up in band, the soprano clarinet and the soprano saxophone are both in the key of B flat, meaning they have extremely similar ranges. Given their similarity in range, size, and construction, it's no wonder why the layman or the budding band kid would refer to the soprano saxophone as a gold clarinet. What was almost mind-boggling to me in the 6th grade was why these two instruments sounded so distinctly different. They were in the same key, they had nearly the same mouthpiece and reed, they were both straight and had nearly the same length. To make matters even more complex for my 12-year-old brain was that I knew that metal soprano clarinets existed that didn't sound like a saxophone, but a clarinet. What is this sorcery that makes these two instruments sound so distinctly different when they seem so similar? What I didn't consider back then was the shape of the body. The clarinet family and the saxophone family both have members from the piccolo range all the way down to the sub-contrabass range with instruments of equivalent keys. Largely, it is the cylindrical body of the clarinet and the conical body of the saxophone which gives these two instruments their distinctive sound. These body shapes determine their particular timbre because they determine which overtones, or upper harmonics, are present above the instrument's fundamental or perceived pitch. Like what Wolfgang Sauss stated, the presence of other higher pitches in varying intensities sounding simultaneously as the perceived pitch are why we can tell the difference between a diapason and a string, a bombard and a vox humana, or a guitar from a harp. We know that sound is created by waves. These waves are measured in cycles. A wave is made up of a crest and a trough. Together, one crest and one trough make up one cycle. The point where a crest and a trough meet, the middle, or neutral, right there, is called a node. These cycles are measured in hertz. The A4 that we are largely accustomed to in 2022 is tuned to 440 cycles or hertz, something I think all of us are familiar with. The mid-Merlache has one of, if not the greatest range of any acoustical musical instrument on the planet, with bottom C of the 64-foot diaphone dulcian speaking at about 8 hertz, all the way up to the smallest mixture pipes at over 12,000 hertz, a span of over 10 octaves. A sine wave is a pure tone with no overtones. It has a single, uniform sound that is the building block of creating timbre. Combinations of sine waves at various pitches and varying degrees of volume are the basis of all sound creation. Here, we will play a sine wave at 440 hertz. Isn't that pretty? This is exactly what a Hammond organ uses via drawbars to bring sine waves at varying pitches, at varying degrees of volume, to give varying timbres in order to imitate diapasons, strings, flutes, and orchestral instruments. The physicist and acoustician Arthur H. Benard referred to this characteristic overtone presence of each musical instrument as its overtone recipe. For example's sake, let's say this is the C2 string of a cello, which sounds the same octave as an 8-foot C organ pipe. The stationary ends of the string are the nodes, and the crest or trough is created between the nodes. When bowed, this C2 is its fundamental pitch, also known as its first harmonic. While this string is vibrating as we see here, it is simultaneously vibrating twice as fast, although less prominent than the fundamental pitch. This sounds the octave of the fundamental's pitch because it is vibrating twice as fast as the fundamental. This is known as the second harmonic. The string is also vibrating 3 times for every one of the fundamental pitch. This is the third harmonic. This pitch would sound very close to an equally tempered G, 1 octave and a half above the fundamental. Continuing, the string's fourth harmonic would vibrate 4 times the fundamental, sounding yet another C, 2 octaves above the fundamental. Progressing a final time, the string vibrates 5 times the fundamental, and the pitch produced would sound close to an equally tempered E, 2 octaves and a major third above the fundamental C. Now, theoretically, this pattern continues to infinity. These pitches are present every time a cellist plucks or bows the C string, although each successive harmonic above the fundamental is generally less present. It is the varying strengths of each of these harmonics that creates the unique timbre of a cello. You can see that the harmonics produced become closer and closer to each other because this pattern is not exponential. Only a single cycle is added to create each successive harmonic. Now here we have the harmonic series on a grand staff. All these pitches, save for the octaves, are approximations when compared to equal temperament tuning. Just intonation is tuning based on the whole number ratios of the harmonic series and is the purest form of tuning. Based off of the harmonic cycles visual, right there, a justly tuned perfect fifth interval from C to G has a relation of 2 to 3 because the C beats 2 cycles or hertz for every 3 cycles of the G. That would be right here, C here, and G here. G beats 3 times for every 2 times of the C. This is a just perfect fifth interval. Continuing, the interval of a just major third has a ratio of 4 to 5. When referring to our visual, the major third occurs between the 4th and 5th harmonics, C to E, right here and right here, where C cycles 4 times for every 5 of E. This is the most in-tune major third that is possible. This now shows how just intonation relates to equal temperament. The whole note pitches are assumed as equal, and the cent designations above each note are how much each note has been adjusted from just intonation to create equal temperament. Given that there are 100 cents between each half step in equal temperament, you can see that as you progress higher into the series, some partials become harder to represent as a recognized note on the grand staff. Notice the B flats being 31 cents flat when compared to equal temperament. The 11th partial, represented by an F sharp, is 49 cents flat. In other words, this partial is almost exactly halfway between an F and an F sharp. For those that are well versed in historic temperaments and the fight to find which temperament was best, this visual gives a taste as to why. Until the 18th century, Brass instruments such as the trumpet and horn had no valves. Each instrument was a single tube wrapped in the familiar shape of each instrument we know today, with a mouthpiece on one end and a bell on the other. Although they were much more limited in their playing ability than their modern counterparts, multiple pitches were still able to be played from them, all thanks to the harmonic series. The sound waves created in a brass instrument are similar in concept, as explained earlier on the string of a cello, known as transverse waves. But these waves are known as longitudinal waves. Rather than an S-shaped wave, these are more like bumping one end of a stretched out slinky, seen here. Like a string, lengths of tubing have a fundamental pitch. This pitch is the key that the instrument is in. If the fundamental pitch is an F, the instrument is in the key of F. This also means that the instrument is able to play pitches of the harmonic series of the fundamental solely by manipulation of the embouchure, the buzzing of the player's lips on the mouthpiece, and the airspeed without the use of valves. Together, these pitches create the harmonic series, often referred to as the natural tone series on brass instruments. In works of the Baroque and classical eras, brass parts were a bit simpler in some ways than their more modern compositions, because of the limitations of the notes that could be played on the instruments, being that trumpets and horns were valveless. Today, we refer to these as natural trumpets and natural horns. They could play in different keys, but only by changing out crooks, which were varying lengths of tubing that put the instrument into a specific key. The parts written for these instruments would largely only be written using the pitches within the harmonic series of the key that the piece was written in. Conversely, many horn parts and trumpet parts of this era can be quite challenging. If a composer wanted a more melodic line from a trumpet or a horn, they would have to write much higher in the harmonic series, where the partials are closer together. This takes a skilled player to play these parts accurately while still sounding musical. With the invention of the piston valve and rotor valve in the early 19th century, the versatility of brass instruments skyrocketed. Virtually all brass instruments of today have a minimum of 3 valves, operated with the index, middle, and ring fingers. These 3 valves add varying lengths of tubing to the instrument when depressed. Today's orchestral brass instruments are nearly universal in what each of the 3 valves does. Depressing the second valve lowers the fundamental pitch 1/2 step. Depressing the first valve lowers the fundamental pitch 1 whole step. And depressing the third valve lowers the fundamental pitch 1 1/2 steps. Using these valves independently and in combination, a brass player is able to instantaneously have 7 different fundamental pitches, 7 lengths of tubing, and 7 different sets of natural tone series. That is not worth a clap, but thank you. Let's see, where did I go? Having these 7 sets of the natural tone series at the tip of the brass player's fingers can now make the instrument fully chromatic in its playability. As an added benefit, the 7 natural tone series have many notes that overlap one another, which gives the player a choice of which fingering is the most in tune for a particular note within a piece. Apologies for it's not a great visual, it's kind of the best I could find on the internet. It's basically just showing the harmonic series for each fingering, the fingerings that I just played. Yeah, Sorry, it's not a great quality picture. When compared to most all other brass instruments, the horn's mid-range sits particularly high in the harmonic series due to its very long length, yet very small mouthpiece. Because of this, it makes for the perfect candidate for this lecture. The fraction stops on pipe organs were developed not as a means of playing a different pitch from the key depressed, but for a timbre change or for reinforcement of the harmonics present in the unison stop. As the harmonics that are present in varying degrees in the cello string, which give the cello its particular timbre, the mutation stops are used as a means to accentuate or exaggerate upper harmonics of a unison stop, and can be combined, as Arthur H. Bernard would say, into our own overtone recipe. How did these fractional lengths come to be as they are for their pitch designation? Any one of us knows that a 2-foot stop sounds an octave higher than a 4-foot stop, and a 4-foot stop sounds an octave higher than an 8-foot stop. Any one of us can realize that a 5 1/3 stop would sound somewhere between an 8 and a 4, and a 3 1/5 would be somewhere between a 4 and a 2. But where did these specific lengths come from? This only gets weirder when we see mutations such as 2 2/7, 8 9, and 2 10/11. Who the hell divides a foot into 11 parts? It all comes down to simple math. Let us look back at the diagram of the cello string and its upper partials. Let's now consider this the fundamental of an 8-foot diapason. Let's say I want to highlight and bring out the second harmonic of this diapason. The second harmonic cycles twice as fast as the fundamental, so I can divide 8 by 2, here it is now, and that gives us 4. As we learned previously, the second harmonic sounds an octave above the fundamental, so I could do this by drawing a 4-foot flute stop. I'm not considering the 4-foot flute stop as playing a second pitch an octave higher than the diapason, but as a reinforcement and highlight of the second harmonic of that diapason. Now let's say I want to bring out the third harmonic of this 8-foot diapason. We need a pitch that has 3 cycles for every 1 cycle of the diapason. We could also say that this 8-foot diapason cycles 1/3 the amount of times as the pipe that we need. If we think about this mathematically, we can divide 8 by 3 to find the length of the pipe we need, just as we divided 8 by 2 to find the pitch needed to highlight the second harmonic. When we divide 8 by 3, we get 2 2/3. If we want to find the length of a pipe needed to reinforce the third harmonic of an 8-foot diapason pipe, in theory, it must be 2 2/3 feet in length. When playing low C, with all 3 of these stops pulled, the 8-foot plays a C as the fundamental, the 4-foot plays a C as the second harmonic, and the 2 2/3 plays a justly tuned G as the third harmonic. Let's jump to the 7th harmonic. We must divide 8 into 7 parts, or find a pipe that cycles 7 times for every one of the 8-foot diapason. By dividing 8 by 7, we get 1 1/7. A 1 1/7 mutation stop reinforces the 7th harmonic of the 8-foot harmonic series. The simple math problem is where pipe lengths come from for all mutation stops. This applies to any non-unison rank, whether it be 8/4, to any unison sounding rank, whether it be 8/4, 16, 32, or 64. If you come across a stop and are unsure of which harmonic series it comes from, we can work backwards. For an extremely unique yet applicable example, the 12 4/5 mutation stop in the pedal right division of the mid-relâche sounds a major third from the unison. The major third is the 5th harmonic of the harmonic series. Multiply 12 4/5 by 5, and we get 64. If you don't have the harmonic series memorized, an even easier trick is to multiply the whole number by the denominator and add the numerator. 12 times 5 is 60, plus 4 is 64. Much thanks to Manuel Rosales for pointing this out to me a few AIO conventions ago when I was well into the gin. Apologies also. I should have done this as a handout because I feel like this is a very helpful and handy equation to know. So just really remember that. When I was in college, my primary instrument was the horn, and I took on organ lessons between my sophomore and junior years. I was able to do much of my organ practicing on the 3-manual 66 rank Latorno in our main performing hall. I found that I was most productive when I brought my horn along, alternating about every half hour between each instrument. Unfortunately, I was not much of a keyboardist, and I knew little about the organ prior to starting lessons, other than being fascinated with the instrument growing up, as I was always wanting to sit in the pew closest to the organist in a small Lutheran church in rural Iowa. I knew what a flue was and what a reed was, and I knew what 8, 4, and 16 meant, but I was more or less starting at 0. As my organ professor, Joseph Golden, began teaching me, he would go through the instrument, explaining what the stops were, why they were there, and what they were used for. He came to the mixtures and the mutations and explained how they were used for coloring and reinforcement of the upper harmonics of unison ranks. I understood, but I was still a bit foggy of what the harmonic series was, how timbre was created, and that most sounds are actually created by a mixture of multiple pitches. It was during one of my horn and organ practice sessions that I had an epiphany about the mutation stops. I found the relation of the natural tone series produced on the horn and how I could begin to replicate this series using various unison and mutation stops on the organ. These off-unison stops weren't unique to pipe organ building. They weren't invented by organ builders centuries ago. As we've learned, this series is found in nature and is the basis of all sound creation. Fast forward to the preparation of this convention while discussing potential lecture topics, I realized I could bring both of these instruments together to explain and prove the harmonic series. Being the reason for mutations and the foundation on which the organ is constructed. As mentioned earlier, opposed to most other brass instruments, the horn sits very high in its natural tone series, meaning many of the partials can easily be played. Additionally, the min relâche has some of the most diverse mutations available of any organ in the world. We can explore many upper harmonics on both of these instruments. I will begin by playing a low B flat on the horn. All pitches I will play will be done without moving any of the valves, meaning I am only using a single and constant length of tubing. This B flat is the fundamental pitch of this specific length of tubing. I will be playing through the tubing's natural tone series up to the 12th harmonic, changing pitches only through the manipulation of my lip muscles and airspeed. Without moving any valves, it is impossible to play any other pitches between the pitches I play. Now I start out on a very, very low note. We'll see if I can actually get it on the first try. We'll see what happens. It's water, I swear, it's not spit. Damn 11th partial. I will play it again along with the mutations available on the organ from the swell choir division. Nick will hold a low B flat on the choir manual and will play each partial that I do, only by changing stop tabs without ever moving from the B flat on the manual. He played a lot better. Being that our society is largely accustomed to equal temperament, you may notice that the intonation of some of the partials on the horn are a bit odd. However, the intonation is reflected in the mutations you heard on the organ. This is where just intonation comes into play. The 7th and the 11th partials are the pitches farthest from any equally tempered note on a keyboard, being 31 cents and 49 cents flat, respectively. Just as they are on my horn, and just as they are in nature. Each pitch I played, and each pitch heard on the organ, is the result of one more cycle added. This is where all of the fractional stops come from and why they sound the way they do. Richards and Midmer-Losh's reasoning for the implementation of the huge array of mutations in the organ was made clear by George Losh in 1974 in a recorded interview mediated by Andrew Latour. Quote, "This organ is a combination of regular church organ as we know it and the theater organ. It has everything in there that anybody might need. We had a reason for using many upper pitch mutations. In such a large room, ordinary 8-foot stops lose their color at a distance. These mutation stops were used to add color to replace what is lost." Siebert, Losh, and Richards went and visited a number of municipal installations, Cleveland and other cities. In some cases, they could hardly hear the organ. The organ was back on the stage somewhere. I think we know which organ he's talking about in that. And did not come out at all. I think Richards made the organ so strong so that when the place filled up with people, the organ would not lose volume. Now, he may have been overcautious on some of that, but of course we know that in any church that is filled up with people, you wonder what became of the organ, end quote. There are many 3rd and 5th sounding ranks throughout the organ, both independent and derived from unison ranks. However, the most extensive mutations are found in the 2 completely duplex divisions, the solo grate and the swell choir. With a few exceptions, these mutations are derived from justly tuned mutation ranks. The solo grate division is divided in 2, as Chuck said earlier, the orchestral reeds and the organ tone flues. The solo grate flues have 3 dedicated mutation ranks. A terz available at 4 pitches, from 6 2/5 to 4/5. A quint, available at 4 pitches from 5 1/3 to 2/3. And a septième, available at 3 pitches from 4 4/7 to 1 1/7. Interestingly, the solo grate reeds contains a single flue voice, the 2 2/3 flute 12th. This stopped wooden rank began its life in the solo division. Originally, the orchestral solo grate had 2 French horns, the 85-note voice 98 16-foot French horn and the 61-note voice 104 8-foot French horn. During construction of the organ, voice 104 French horn and voice 64 flute 12th were swapped. Some of you may have traveled deep enough into the right stage chamber to see the orchestral solo grate division to find a squat and stubby stopped rank sandwiched between soaring 8-foot color reeds. While it may seem like the oddball out, this powerful mutation can be used to give further texture to these reeds. It can also add a powerful color to the flues as well. The swell choir has 5 dedicated ranks for mutations. A third available at 4 pitches from 6 2/5 to 4/5. A fifth available at 5 pitches from 5 1/3 to 1/3. A seventh available at 3 pitches from 4 4/7 to 1 1/7. Now this is where they get even more fun. A ninth available at 3 pitches from 3 5/9 to 8/9. And an 11th available at 3 pitches from 2 10/11 to 8/11. Additionally, both of these duplexed divisions have 8-foot Gemshorn unit ranks with unison of pitches available at 1, 1/2, and 1/4. Because of all of the high unison and non-unison pitches available in both divisions, an organist can, in a sense, create their own mixture. One can also create a wide variety of cornets using the expanse of pitches available. Using the more unique mutations, one can get a rather clangorous, bell-like sound using the 9th and 11th mutations for those occasions when you wish you had a bell choir in your organ chamber. A peculiarity in the swell choir division is the trio of Gemshorns. In Richard's specification, the 8-foot Gemshorn was to have 2 celestes. He states that Gemshorn Celeste 1 is to be tuned flat, while Gemshorn Celeste 2 is to be tuned very flat. Gemshorn Celeste 1 is available at 8, 5 1/3, 2 2/3, and 1 1/3. While Gemshorn Celeste 2 is available at 8, 3 1/5, and 1 3/5. The intention of having a single rank serve as a mutation and a celeste is rather ingenious. However, these seem to be a bit more theoretically interesting than truly successful as he intended. Firstly, we can only assume that Richards was incorrect with his tuning intentions for the celestes. While his remark about Gemshorn Celeste 2 being tuned very flat works, being that a justly tuned third is 14 cents flat, his remark about Gemshorn Celeste 1 being tuned just flat would not make for a successful quint mutation, for a justly tuned fifth is not flat but 2 cents sharp. Our initial attempt at tuning these ranks was to tune them both pure as their respective mutations, and in doing so would create a flat and a sharp celeste to pair with the parent Gemshorn. Unfortunately, this was not as successful as we had hoped, for the quint Gemshorn Celeste 1 had an almost inaudible undulation, only making the Gemshorn slightly brighter in tone, while the tierce Gemshorn Celeste 2 produced far too much undulation. The final solution was to meet somewhere in the middle with both ranks, favoring the celeste, as they are primarily used as celestes. Here's Gemshorn 1 heard as a mutation and then as a celeste. and Gemshorn Celeste 2, heard as a mutation and then as a Celeste. The Great Division has a fairly typical supply of mutations to fill out the principal choruses, with independent voices at 5 1/3, 3 1/5, and 2 2/3. Additionally, it has an independent 10 2/3 for when the Great's wooden 32-foot sub-principal is included in the chorus. Now I have to go run over and help Nick. I'm going to be his console assistant for this one. 7, okay, go. Just as he started, I realized I forgot my clicker. So this was his initial registration, and at more or less each phrase, these were what was added in to the chorus. I think that's, oh. Yeah, that's what was added in. In addition to the myriad of flue mutations, the organ has a selection of reed mutations. Unfortunately, some of the most interesting reed mutations are in divisions that do not currently function. The brass chorus division, located in the right forward chamber, is essentially the reed chorus for the 63-rank Great division. Being that the Great only has a 3-rank 16/8/4 reed chorus, the brass chorus is what we assume will match the full Great principal chorus. We have 2 independent reed mutations in this division, a tromba quint at 5 1/3 and a tromba 12th at 2 2/3. Another voice of interest is the tierce mixture 3, which has 32 reed pipes in rank 1. Its interesting composition is 10-17-22, that is a third, in a unison. Reed mutations are also available in the fanfare division, located in the left ceiling chamber. Here is where we find the only tierce reed mutation in the whole organ, voice number 210, tromba tierce, available at 6 2/5 and 1 3/5 on the 7 manual console, and 3 1/5 and 1 3/5 on the 5 manual console. The rather famous 32-foot trombone on 35 inches of wind with its lowest pipes located outside of the chamber has 4 unison pitches and 1 non-unison pitch available, being 32, 16, 8, 5 1/3, and 4. As a sort of inverse to the trombone, there is a tromba quint on 25 inches of wind, available at 3 non-unison pitches and 1 unison pitch, being 10 2/3, 8, 5 1/3, and 2 2/3. Functioning reed mutations do exist in the stage chambers. The solo division has 2 reed mutations, both taken from unison ranks. This includes the only manual mutation on 50 inches of pressure, taken from the 16-foot tuba magna at 5 1/3. Because this is not an overpowering 50-inch stop, it can add interesting coloring to a solo reed line. There is also a 10 2/3 taken from the 30-inch pressure 16-foot trumpet profunda, which can add gravity to a chordal reed plenum. The most unified voice in the entire organ is voice 19, 32-foot fagato of the pedal left division. This 97-note rank is available at all of the expected unison pitches from 32-foot to 2-foot, and is also available at 5 1/3 and 2 2/3 in the pedal, giving more of a tamed spice to a full pedal line. The pedal right 32-foot bombardin on 40 inches of wind is available at 32, 16, 8, and 4, as well as 10 2/3 and 5 1/3. Voice number 2, diaphone phonon on 50 inches of wind, is a 39-note rank, one of only 3 voices in the entire organ that is available exclusively in the pedal, at 16 and 10 2/3. This rank uses diaphone pipes up to note 32, 4-foot G, and then has some of the thickest and heaviest linen lead flue pipes on the organ for notes 33 through 39. This is one of 2 mutations on 50 inches and makes for quite a rumble when played with itself as a 32-foot resultant. All 18 of the quint mutations in the pedal right division are derived from unison ranks. Similar to the swell choir and solo great mutations, the pedal right division has 2 justly tuned unit stops for the tierce and septième mutations. These ranks are 68 pipes each, with appropriate stop tabs for the 8, 16, 32, and 64-foot harmonic series. Using the 12 4/5 and 9 1/7, along with unisons and quints, one can obtain a fairly convincing 64-foot resultant. Lastly, we have the mutation that I hope to see in all of you include in your next instrument specification, the 42 2/3. I'm sorry to say that Minralash skimped here and did not build a straight 42 2/3 rank, for it is derived from the 64-foot diaphone dulcian. Pairing these together, we can get a sweet and delicate 128 resultant, ideal for your next Bach trio. Adding in some upper work gives a bit more substance to the 128-foot resultant. Nick will add the 42 2/3 when he reaches bottom C of the pedal board. See if you can hear the difference between the 64 and the 128-foot resultant. Is this useful? Maybe not. I venture to believe that the 42 2/3 tab was installed simply because they could. They had the pipes to do it, and it was only merely an addition of a switch in the relay room. Nick will play the synthetic reed he played at the beginning of our chat. After everything we've talked about, why does this give the illusion of a 32-foot reed when the lowest pitch is a single 8-foot rank? Why do any of the resultants heard today imply a lower pitch than is actually being played? The only thing that these waves have in common are their beginning and ending nodes. Right here and right here. Theoretically, mixing any of these partials together will begin to suggest a fundamental pitch, because we have two or more pitches or partials that sync here and here, as I pointed out. Oh no, are we dying? Oh. I think we got low batteries, darn it. Well, where I pointed earlier at the nodes. This syncing of all partials cycling at once fool our ears into hearing this fundamental frequency, even though it's not actually there. Likely, the most practical lesson one could get from this lecture would regard tuning, whether it be mutations or mixtures. Quints and tierces are quite easy for us to hear come into tune, often tuned with an 8-foot or 4-foot stop. Things may be a bit more intimidating once coming across things like sevenths and ninths. I went into tuning the seventh, 9th, and 11ths in the mid-Merloche with the mindset of building my own harmonic series while tuning. I began with tuning the 16-foot stopped diapason. This would be my fundamental. I then tuned the Gemshorn and the cone gamba, using either of these as my 8-foot, representing the second harmonic. I chose these because they are natural occurring upper harmonics, feeling that these would assist in hearing the upper mutations come into tune. I then brought on the 5 1/3 to tune, using both the 16 and one of the 8-foots for tune as reference ranks. Because the swell choir is a completely unified division, I brought on a 4-foot stop taken from one of the already tuned unison ranks to act as the 4th harmonic. The 5th harmonic, sounding a 3rd, was tuned in the same fashion, adding on top of the lower 4 harmonics as tuning references. With a solid harmonic series built this far, it made bringing the 7th into tune quite easy, for the large macro cycle of the fundamental was supported by 5 other harmonics. However, as I got into the 9th and 11th, I found that I had too much sound playing to hear these come into tune. The sheer volume of 8 lower pipes playing to bring one soft, dull pipe into tune is not practical. This is where I began to experiment with removing select stops. I found removing the booming 16-foot helped, and sometimes removing the quint as well, being that it is a more powerful than other mutations. I took this particular video when tuning the 49-cent flat 11th. I found that using the 8-foot cone gamba with the 4 4/7 and the 3 5/9 worked the best in hearing this crazy rank come into tune. I hope you could hear that. The experience, I'm sure as all of you may assume was quite different than hearing it through a video recorded on an iPhone. But it was actually really cool hearing that 11th come into tune. And you could actually hear it using that crazy registration I use, using the 7th and the 9th come into to help bring it into tune. My goal was to tune all of these without the aid of electronic devices, and I made lots of excited noises after checking the 11th with my tuning app, seeing that I was in the 47 to 49 cent flat range for each pipe. I was successful in doing so not because I have a particularly gifted ear, but once one understands the harmonic series and where these mutations come from, I believe that any one of us can tune an organ can tune these unique mutations. Build a harmonic series below the mutation you are tuning, and then experiment with removing stops if the volume of the tuning pitches becomes too great. Find a registration that works for you and your own ear to hear. Even if you come across an oddly difficult quint to tune, try throwing on a second rank an octave below the tuning rank. There's no single way to tune a mutation, but having the knowledge of where these come from and why they exist can greatly improve our ability to tune them, use them, and implement them into our instruments. The next one. Happy fractional tuning, and I hope you all took at least something valuable away from what the fraction I was talking about. Also, much thanks to my husband over here playing the pipe organ.
So once again, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope you enjoyed the explanation and the little bit of the tour we got there of some of the less thought about stops, I think, in a big organ like Atlantic City. You hear about the giant reeds and the big 64s and 32s, but some of those tinier, more interesting little colors that are important, but they don't get all the billing that some of the big stops do. So my thanks again to Carl Hersom, Nick Myers, and to Mark Hudson-Piller and Brad Jones and everybody at American Institute of Organ Builders. If you want some more information about that organization, you can find it down in the description for this video. So we do have more videos coming out, I promise. We are getting ready to head out on the road. It's still kind of wintry here, but we're going to hope for good weather, and you should start seeing some videos very soon, so make sure you're subscribed to our channel, and I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks for watching.